Employees of Disney, what is the craziest thing you've seen happen in the park? One time I saw the guy grope a princess while taking a photo with her. Full on boot grab, like he was drowning, and here it was a boy. All the public staff, costumed, and actors wear earpieces and have noticeable security, and security dressed like tourists. Anyway, she screamed and all of a sudden men in suits burst from everywhere. Literally out of the walls, those small doors on the creepy houses, and from behind vendors. They snatched him up and he disappeared into the wall behind the princess. All in all, it took less than 15 seconds. Then, as if nothing happened, she waves and takes another photo with a little kid. Most people didn't even notice it all happened so quickly. Not an employee myself, but took my daughter to Disney World about 13 years ago. We were at Animal Kingdom watching the Lion King acrobatic show. One of the tumble monkeys came down the wrong way onto the trampoline right in front of us and completely broke his leg, bone tearing through flesh and all. He begins screaming in pain. Another tumble monkey starts making the throat/cut sign and they crank up the music to drown out his screams and rush him off stage. At the end of the show, they made an announcement saying, "Don't worry kids, the tumble monkey is okay." Oh no, he was not. TLDR. Tumble monkey broke leg like Joe Theismann. I didn't see it happen, nor did it happen in the park, but when I was in the Disney College Program 5-6 Chinese International College Program cast members were terminated for having an orgy in the hot tub at one of the housing areas. Not me, but my older sister who worked at Disneyland for around 4 years. 1. Star Tours. Wife trying to give her husband a handy J with their daughter next to them. After making an announcement about family friendliness, she tried again, but this time over the pants. Second reminder stopped that. Full cabin of people, by the way. 2. Monorail. Sexist foreign dude refuses to stay in the nose cone. Front part with the driver, with a female pilot. Just to frick with him, we kept bringing in female drivers until we ran out. Once we ran out, we had a guy drive him over to the next stop. He then got bumped out by another girl. He walked off in a huff at downtown Disney, not knowing he was outside of Disneyland. 3. Guy gets out of car at Autopia, walks toward the exit stairs, stops for a second and a piece of poop just plops out of his cargo shorts. He just walks away. 4. Autopia again. Someone pooped on the exit ramp and people ended up tracking it all over the place. Had to make a human wall of cast members to stop people from walking in it. Biohazard and all. 5. Late at night, so the monorail's fairly empty. Couple gets in the back. Obviously a little bit shady, so we check the cameras about 2 minutes from the station. Her head was in his lap, between his knees. The quote was, "Hey, we'll be at our next stop in about 2 minutes, so you might want to finish up." Didn't stop. "Yes, we're talking to you two in the back." They stopped. 6. Star Tours. While checking seatbelts and came across a lady with a backpack on her lap, so I tell her to put it under the seat. She refuses and I notice that the backpack was moving. I asked her to open it and she refuses. I asked her one more time and she did. There was a baby in the backpack. She was asked to leave. 3 things I can think of from my CP, way back in 03. Thing the first, Aladdin and Prince Charming, or possibly Eric, I forget, making out in the men's locker room. Thing the second, one of the Cinderellas asking if people wanted to feel her new fake tart ass. Thing the last, friend of a friend who was also a CP went to work hungover and apparently passed out during his shift as Tigger. From what I understand, he wasn't even fired as it was pretty warm that day, bordering on a code 1 or whatever the heck they called it when you had to abbreviate your character sets, and no one could prove he was hungover, still buzzed. Oh, my turn. I was working at a cash register in Pop Century and I watched a woman in an electric scooter pin a small child between her and the register. Somehow she didn't notice his loud screams and tried to continue about her business until she had to be told to move because she was crushing a child. Also, I once got yelled at for not speaking Spanish because apparently Veronica is a Spanish name. I am the palest ginger I know. On 9/11 the characters formed a living wall by holding hands and making a circle around the entire park, then slowly closed in, gently herding every single visitor out of the park. Security walked behind them to make sure nobody slipped past. Nobody was told what was happening, just something like, "Sorry, the park is closed." Man, that's eerie. I'm literally sitting on my break in downtown Disney as I type this, and I made an account specifically because I get excited talking about the crazy things I see here at Disney. I worked as custodial at the Grand Floridian for the first 8 months of my college program. I had multiple people ask me where the best places to buy weed are. Various other drug issues, cast members included. That was the first time I was offered crack. See, there is a Harry Potter closet underneath the staircase in the lobby and you can hear everything people say around it. Well, once there was a much older man Skyping at the desk near the closet. From what I could gather, he was excited to go home and see his little girl get her license and missed sleeping in bed with her. It gets lonely in a bed all alone. It was unsettling. People have also let their children relieve themselves everywhere. In line on the Norway ride, in the pool, on the floor in front of the sink in the bathroom. On Friday I let a guest stay at my place because her ex-boyfriend was scaring her and she was going home in the morning and didn't have a place to stay. WDW is a crazy place. Former cast member, here, while working at Spaceship Earth, the giant golf ball of Epcot, in the summer of 2005, the parks had an influx of Brazilian tour groups. Each group consisted of about 200 college-aged kids with matching shirts. Every one of them came into the park acting like they had won the World Cup. Spaceship Earth is the first attraction they go on, still chanting and yelling until they get to the boarding area, where we finally get them to shut up. We divide them into 4-seater cars and hope they don't disturb the slow-moving, quiet ride for anyone else. 5 minutes pass, and the ride comes to a shuddering halt as the emergency stop is activated. A loud beep emits from the loading console, signaling that one of the sensor mats, lining the entire length of the track, had been tripped. Another cast member and myself run into the attraction to the Renaissance section. Lo and behold, there were Brazilians. They were all sitting in their cars, attempting to look innocent, looking at us nervously. We ask them if anyone had jumped out of their cars. One girl understands us and begins to say something, until one of her friends stops her by saying something in Portuguese. The girl suddenly forgets the question and stays quiet. After failed attempts to get someone to confess, we run back to the loading platform, trying not to keep the other guests on the ride from waiting any longer than they have to. 7 minutes have elapsed since the ride stopped. We rack back into the ride and start it up again. Intrusion alarm goes off again. We run back up to the same area. Tour group acts like nothing happened. 15 minutes has gone by now, so we have to evacuate the ride. I get the section with the tour group. I go back up to Renaissance. At least 5 of the tour group were out of their cars and posing with the audio animatronics. Frick no. We raise our voices and motion to them to get back in their cars until we tell them to get out. The evac goes smoothly as we keep an eye on as much of the group as we can, and direct the entire group to the exit, where our duty manager, 4 security guards, and an Orange County police officer were waiting for them. Duty manager proceeds to talk to the tour group leader, then addresses the group. All of them were to have their tickets taken away, escorted out of the park, and banned from the property. She then repeats the spiel in Spanish and Portuguese, and escorts the entire group out. No one in the group says a thing. They arrived like they won the World Cup. They left like they were defeated. TLDR. Brazilian tour group jumped a ride. Banned. I visited Disneyland over the weekend and saw a kid puking. Less than a minute after the kid finished, 3 cast members appeared out of nowhere and were already halfway done cleaning it up a few seconds later. It's crazy and impressive how spotless the park is kept even this long after Walt has been gone. My parents have both been characters and managerial folks at WDW. Some that come to mind are the Formaldehyde sisters. These 2 old ladies would attend the Beauty and the Beast stage show every day. All of the shows they could make it to. All of them. They also brought with them Lord knows how it got into the park. Their taxidermied dead dog. They would take him out to watch. Every time. This show is pretty much the same every time. I don't know what was going on in their brains, but it concerns me. I have oodles more from my parents, and a couple of things I've seen as well. I'll try to post them if I remember. Do not be startled. It's just Turk and JD in disguise secretly catching every wonderful performance of Beauty and the Beast. Rowdy loves Belle. I worked in Frontierland a couple years back. For a while they had western versions of Chip and Dale walking around among the guests. One day, a drunk elderly man found the need to bum rush poor Chip and punch him. Although inside the suit was a small Asian girl, as hard as he could in the stomach. Chip fell over and her head fell off, and Dale, also a girl inside, started to run towards a backstage exit screaming call security as loud as she could. Thankfully there was a plainclothes security officer nearby who heard the commotion, and shortly after the man was taken into custody. I had just started working there and had no clue what to do, but thankfully nothing like that happened again. Not an employee, but my friend that formerly was said parents spread the ashes of their dead children in Cinderella Castle's moat on a regular basis, not with park permission, so their kids can spend eternity at the happiest place on earth. I worked as a PA for a production company doing a reality show on the High School Musical show popular at the time. We were filming at Disney's California Adventure and were instructed to set up our production trailers behind back entrance to where you would watch World of Color water fountain show. While on a routine security detail of production equipment staged around the trailers, I noticed one of the trailers dangerously leaking diesel fuel. These trailers were pretty wide, so they took up most of the space down this backlot ramp. Like out of a movie. As I noticed this, my vision rack focuses to not one or two but all Disney princess actors piling out of a 15-passenger van walking down said narrow diesel fuel drenched alley. My eyes conveniently glanced up and saw the cast smoking area right up above to the left. Clearly no one had done a logistics sweep of the area. Two cast members were walking up the ramp at that very moment, readying to light up for their break. Action Jackson mode kicks in and I walkie in the developing incident while running down the alley to halt said about smoke cast members and inform all the Disney princesses what was about to happen, and politely asked them to take a detour to the other side of the trailers while kicked a bucket under the spigot. I wish so incredibly hard I had proof of this, but Cinderella straight up in character smiled at me, winked and thanked me for being such a brave young man and pecked me on the cheek. The rest of the princesses giggled in unison. Goddammit, even writing it I wouldn't believe me. I wish I had a smartphone back then. I swear for once this internet person is telling the truth. TLDR. Saved all the Disney princesses from a potential fiery demise. Former Disneyland and California Adventure cast member for over 2 years. 1. Various medical emergencies. 2. Parents borderline beating their children. 3. Grown butt adults yelling in the faces of employees over their kid not being tall enough for whatever ride. 4. Every body fluid imaginable, at least once. 5. People getting out of Space Mountain cars while escalating up the ramp. 6. Various instances of crowd control gone wrong during peak holidays. C. New Year's freaking Eve, never again, ever. 7. Second-hand story, but a guy in my department got headbutted and had his nose broken during the event mentioned above. I have a close friend who still works there with 8 years of experience between us in 3 departments. He has even better stories than I do. We'll elaborate on anything and even have proof for an AMA if anyone's interested. So long as we don't reveal enough for people to track us down and fire him, blacklist me from working again. When I was a kid at Disneyland, I was in line for the train roller coaster ride. A man on the ride got his head ripped off when the coaster malfunctioned and he hit his head on a beam. The park employees just said the ride was broken and to come back later. They were escorting away the people who were on the ride with the guy who died. A couple days later we continued on our vacation to Las Vegas, and our first night there Siegfried and Roy got attacked by tigers. It was a good vacation. Former CP here. 1. Mother got in my face because her autistic son couldn't skip the lines for characters. 2. Parents who lost their 2-year-old 3 separate times in my area. I mean, she could walk on her own but could not communicate. Thankfully I've worked with very small children before and was able to at least figure out that yes, she was lost. It took them between 10 and 20 minutes to realize they had lost her. It was an Orthodox Jewish family with 7 or 9 kids. 3. One time this guy came running to my area from backstage from the direction of Tower of Terror. Guards etc had been warned and were waiting for him. One cop just clotheslined him outside of the gift shop, and CMs everywhere made a circle around him to block his arrest from view. The whole time he was yelling frick Disney crap dong dong, they washed his blood off the pavement so quick you would have known he was there. 4. A woman who kept slapping her daughter for acting like a kid. 5. A man who may or may not have been shaking his baby to get it to stop crying. 6. Brazilian tour groups. 7. 2 morbidly obese people with 4 children outraged that they weren't allowed to bring their stroller in the attraction because of fire code. 8. Anything and everything having to do with strollers. Look people, I'm not parking strollers because it's my favorite thing to do. And no, I promise you that your stroller has not been stolen. In 8 months I saw that happen twice. And don't leave your professional camera and coach bag in your stroller. I don't care if you're in the most magical place on earth. This is a tourist attraction and there are criminals here. Also, no one is deliberately trying to hide your stroller, unless you are outrageously rude to us. In which case yes, I do my best to put it somewhere strange and inconvenient. If you want details on any of these, I can post more later. Former Disney character from the 70s. We did not have any people go out with us to keep people in line. Whenever we were on set and saw a Brazilian tour group, we would motion to the other characters in our group and seriously head for the exit. They would pull our tails, squeeze our hands, try to feel up the women and be real buttholes. Our supervisors would find out and let it slide. Okay, so I work at Universal Studios, not Disney, but I decided to tell this story anyways. I work at the turnstiles, or the front entry to the park, of all places. It sucks. But this one time, I saw this kid, maybe 7, dressed in full Harry Potter garb, with the wand and everything, like $150 worth of Potter merch. So he goes around casting spells on people, basically just yelling random words and pointing his wand at people. Honestly, he seemed like a pretty cool little child, and everyone who saw him was playing along, playing dead or feigning some kind of response, making this kid's day. Everyone, that is, until he comes across this ultra-Christian lady, who after laying eyes on him, shields her entire family from this child, not in a laughable or entertaining way, but as in she was seriously concerned that this kid could be some kind of wizard. She went straight up to the dad and told him to control his child and that the presence of witchcraft in his life would surely destroy his life, and dang him to heck forever. The man did not seem amused, and they began to yell at each other, causing us to separate the line. One of the lead team members opened up a specific line to get the kid and his family through before the lady flipped her lid. But of course, right before we got the dad across the line, into the park, the lady screamed something that I couldn't understand about Jesus, and the dad turns back, looks at her for like 1 second and just yells, "Frick your Jesus." Instantly security, and the cops who we keep around for these issues, come out and end up breaking a huge fight between this guy and what seems like maybe 4 or 5 ultra-Christian people. I don't know what happened to that lady, but I know that she at some point fell to the ground and busted her face. I didn't see it, but one of the janitors showed me her missing tooth. Worst thing I saw was Justin Bieber deny to make a Wish kids an autograph cause he was getting on a ride, and then he just walked away. Dong. He is the captain of all douches. I sincerely hope he caught something from that H. Something permanent. When I was a CP, I was the custodian at the pools of the Grand Floridian and the Polynesian. Besides the ton of drug paraphernalia and residue I found in the more upscale pool bathrooms, a pretty frequent occurrence would be a pretty intoxicated adult female guests who would just kinda wander around at night and try to slip us their room keys. The frequency of these attempts increased when there were professional conferences in the convention center. This happened to me and several of my co-workers. I look back now and kinda wish I had, but back then I was so scared of just being sent home. I also watched Kelly Ripa's kid try to dive into the pool head first and have to be rescued by the lifeguards. So much blood. I also almost ran over Tina Fey and her daughter with a towel metro. I'm not an employee, but I went to WDW one year and saw this guy in his late 20s fingering a woman behind a vacant kiosk near Splash Mountain. Not super magical. Appropriate ride name. Former Magic Kingdom food and beverage cast member here. During the holiday season the park becomes extremely crowded. Cast members are very outnumbered by guests. Naturally, the restaurants get very full, and seating becomes limited. In order to accommodate for the high volume, we had to limit seating for those entering the dining rooms, meaning no food equals no seat, so there's no holding tables. People didn't like this. I lost count at how many times people swore at me, as if I'm the one making up this rule. It got pretty bad in one of our dining rooms. One cast member was positioned in front of the dining room entrance enforcing the no food no table rule. This dining room was pretty far from the registers and the cast member had little supervision. One man decided it would be a good idea to shove her, making her trip, and subsequently fall down a few steps. Since the park was so busy, it was almost impossible to hit the person that did this. Unfortunately, the same cast member who got tripped also got spit on by another guest. It's amazing to see how primitive some people act when they don't get their way. This is a story a friend of mine told me about a friend who did the program. Poop everywhere. I had a friend who worked in food and a friend who worked attractions and then got switched to custodial. He said he experienced fesses in places fesses had never been before. Some of the things that he witnessed were adult ridiculousness. One time he went to wash his hands, hit the button on the dryer, and got sprayed with poop someone had stuffed up inside the dryer. Someone had taken their crap and stuffed it in the hand dryer and it got shot out of the dryer at him. Some lady went to Disneyland and went on a bunch of rides. She's walking through downtown Disney going to get food when she complains about a stomachache. Went to the bathroom and has a miscarriage. Ends up she didn't know she was pregnant. From my experience visiting Tokyo Disneyland with my boyfriend, who is Japanese, the craziest things I saw were actually so pronounced because of how normal they were, or things you wouldn't associate with crazy, like the anecdotes about Christian youth groups. Japanese people have an unwavering and universal reverence and respect for Disneyland that goes beyond the logic of Occidental thought. People in the 30s will pay for family vacations across the country just to walk around the park and see the parade and be more enthralled than an American 6-year-old at Disney World in Florida. This isn't just some people, it's most people. I couldn't believe that my friends, in their 30s, waited for 2 hours to meet Mickey, and then 2 hours meeting another character instead of wanting to go on the rides. It was even more puzzling that they had met Mickey numerous times before. Japanese people are so in love with Disney that when they see or hear people defiling the Holy Land, they viciously defend it. Reading stories about the handy pandemic that happens when the lights go out reminds me of when my boyfriend and I rode Pirates of the Caribbean and the Chinese couple behind us. Asian nationals tend to loathe each other by default. Were talking loudly and using flash photography during the ride, completely ruining the ambience. My boyfriend, a typically reserved and pleasant man, was so deeply and emotionally affected by his fantasy voyage being ruined by some tourists with no respect for the rules that he shamed them loudly and mercilessly to a round of applause from everyone else on our boat. He was so angry he chain smoked 3 cigarettes after we got off. I'm sure that there might be some cast here from Tokyo Disneyland who have their own war stories, but in general, TLDR, Japanese people love Disney so much they consider breaking the rules of the park as an act of sedition and is not tolerated. You could be getting mugged in the streets in Japan, crying for help, and pedestrian thought is not my problem, but draw attention to hooliganism on Disney property and witness a public stoning. I used to work at Epcot back when they still did the Leave a Legacy program, taking people's photos and etching them on the metal plates that are mounted out in front of Spaceship Earth. I took the pics and rang people up for their purchase, and then we took turns in the back looking at the pics to make sure they were high contrast enough for the metal plate etching process. Sometimes, I helped out in the gift shop under Spaceship Earth or in the stroller rental area, especially at closing when people were buying lots of crap and returning their strollers. The most WTF thing I saw happened the second day I was at work there. A nice looking family came up to our station to buy the legacy photo. The dad wanted the pic to be of their kid, who looked to be about 4 years old, only the kid was exhausted and crying, clearly in no mood to be photographed. The dad tried a few times to make him smile for our camera, bribery, threats, etc., but the kid just couldn't stop whimpering. He was beat. The The dad then grabbed the kid's hand and dragged him back into our backstage area, which was around the corner of a nearby wall. I started after him to tell him get out of there, please, but before I got there, I heard loud smacking sounds and the kid shrieking in pain. I heard the dad yelling something about you will smile for that picture or else. The guy was beating his kid to make him cooperate for the photo, and he had taken him behind the wall to do it so no one would see. I stopped dead, stunned. I looked back at my co-worker, who had the same deer in the headlights look I probably had. The next second, the guy came around the wall again, dragging the kid with him. The kid's face was wet with snot and tears, but he was holding it together. I did my best to cheer him up with some inane chatter for the camera, and he mustered a tiny smile. The family left, and I went backstage to find my manager. I told my manager what happened and asked what the heck I should have done. He was pretty shocked and said he wasn't really sure what could have been done there, and it was over so fast that there wasn't time to do much. I nodded, and then I burst into tears and stood there in our backstage clock-in room, sobbing. I felt so horrible for that little kid and what he probably went through all the time. I couldn't imagine beating a child because he didn't smile enough. I worked there a few more months and never saw anything else remotely that WTF. To this day, I'm not sure what, if anything, I might have done. My sister worked in a shop on Main Street. Kobe Bryant came in and asked her in a hushed tone, "You know who I am? Yes. You think you can help us out, without making a big deal? Yes." Not an employee story, but I was there on vacation years ago, and the huge Christmas tree in the lobby of the Grand Californian hotel caught on fire. It was in the middle of the night, we all were evacuated into California Adventures and hung out in the Bugs Life ride. I worked at Club Disney for the brief time it was open. We had codes we used on the radio headsets that were coordinated with character names. For instance, code BLU meant there was blood that needed to be cleaned up immediately. One day, I'm taking a stroll around the club to check on things when I spot a small boy about 2 years old taking a massive dump right in the middle of the play area. He sees me, starts to cry, and runs away with no clothing on the lower half of his body. I get on the radio and can't think of what to say as we hadn't discussed a code for human feces in the play area and naked kid running around. So I just called, "I have a code poo situation in the play area and piglets on the loose." Worked at the Great Movie Ride in Disney MGM Studios back in the day. I wasn't there, but I was told a couple of cast members were fired after banging inside of the elephant in the Tarzan scene. Also while I was there, the Wicked Witch had a hydraulic fluid leak on her wrist and hosed down a couple of rows of guests when she was whipping her arm around. Lots of stories from that ride. Also, on another stint at Disney MGM, I worked at the backlot or water tank portion, and on my last day I did a flip into the pool and crawled out soaking. A manager showed up shortly after freaking out because someone told him a guest got thrown in the water. I took a ton of photos but my camera got stolen that night. Lame. I'm not a Disney employee but I did go on a jungle cruise ride where the boat captain got us lost and we nearly got killed by headhunters. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.